They had set a chair at the foot of the iron throne for the sake of custom, as if iron would stoop to meet a man. It was a modest thing of oaken slats and poor upholstery, placed on a rush-strewn dais far below the welded sprawl of sword and spike and spear points that rose like a storm-frozen wave above the hall. Candles burned along the walls and on clustered iron stands, and their light did strange, shivering work upon the throne. Flames writing themselves along notched blades, bright beads in pitted steel, dull orange in the knuckles of rivets. The smells were wax, old dust, oiled mail, a faint tang of vinegar where some servant had wiped a stain from a flagstone, and the deeper human odors of a crowd kept waiting too long. Aemon sat on the modest chair, not because custom had prevailed, but because he would not stand as if he already owned the height. The weight of the chain about his neck lay across his collarbones in 50 learned pressures. Silver to stand for healing, black iron for ravenry, yellow gold for the higher mysteries, red copper, pale tin, smooth steel. There were stranger links as well, and colder metals that the Citadel named, and a few they named with half a smile and half a superstition. He felt them all. He did not lift his hand to touch the chain because to finger a link would be to pray to it. The lords of the realm stood along the walls and beneath banners and in little islands of power among the crowded benches. They kept their tempers packed behind the gracious habits of court, and that made their silence heavier. A few whispered, and their whispers made little eddies of attention and suspicion that flowed and stalled and flowed again. Over all of it, the Iron Throne loomed, indifferent and patient, could wait. It had waited through more handsome men than Aemon, more ruthless, more foolish, more beloved. It would outlast him and his children and theirs if he took it. No sword is more ambitious than the sword that never moves. When Aemon raised his eyes, he found his brother at the edge of the light, straight as a spear and trying to look like a man whose heart had learned to fold itself into a thinner shape. Aegon's dark hair was cropped close and unruly all the same. He had the look of a young man who had yearned for something too long to put it down easily when it fell into reach. Yet there was no rancor in him, at least none Aemon could sense across the hall's expanse. But he would be thinking of duties and oaths and ancient expectations, and the knowledge that once passed between them as hand to hand would never be restored to that old simplicity, not ever again. And there was another man set back a little from the first rank, tall in the way that transforms a room by standing in it. Ser Duncan's height had never learned to hide. He looked like a tower built by chance on a plain, and his eyes tracked Aemon with the wary patience of a farmer watching weather. He was decked in no lord's colors and bore no polished elegance in his demeanor. There was no cross-hilted pretense in him. Aemon had never been sure how to describe the very particular comfort the sight of that big, honest head gave him. There were many cunningnesses a king could purchase. Guile was cheap. A man like Duncan was never cheap. The herald had rehearsed his cry until the words existed more in muscle and breath than in thought. He called out names and claims and lines of dissent until each syllable felt like another grain of sand dropped into a glass. Then he fell silent all at once, having come to the place where the glass would not be turned again. When Aemon stood, the chain woke upon his chest like a handful of coins stirred by a quick hand. He looked down into the hall, and it took him a moment to find the voice that had been his all his life. There are voices for the rookeries and voices for the sickroom, voices for the private talk that carries over the length of a pallet bed in a winter chamber. There is also the voice that belongs to men who say yes and no when the world waits. He found that one and tried it on like armor that had been hung too long in a tower. "My lords," he said, "my lords and ladies, your graces, holy father, sworn swords and sworn enemies. You have asked, and I will answer plainly, for there is enough fog in this hall already. The Iron Throne is offered me. I will not pretend I am worthy, for worthiness and desire are seldom acquainted, and rulership is neither prayer nor sermon. But a thing won by your will can be scorned no more than a man can be scorned by his own breath. I accept." There was a sound that was not a cheer and not a groan. It was the sound of a very great fish turning in deep, old water. A few hands came together. A few men bowed their heads in a manner that was properly theatrical. A woman near the end of a bench laughed once, brittle as dropped pottery, and was still. A lord commander of a city watch somewhere thanked some small god that the streets would not riot tonight. A messenger half a day's ride away began his horse's saddling. For news travels before the birds can be loosed. The Iron Throne did not shift in its patience. Aemon's hand rose to his chain then, because it must. The links were warm with his own heat. He did not lift them away. He folded his fingers around the weight and kept them there briefly, as if closing a book over a page he would need to remember. "I will lay this down," he said, his voice more quiet now and requiring the hall to come closer to hear. "But not yet. A king must be crowned in truth and law, not in a private wish. Until that day, I am as I have been, your servant. After that day, if 7 days or 70 must pass, I will do what I vowed to do when I was young and proud and did not think a vow would ever have to speak out loud in my mouth against me." He let his hand fall. That is, to serve the realm. There were ceremonies and countersignatures, a drift of figures through the hall. As the conclave broke apart into smaller meetings, promises swaddled in polite words and commitments that were never named as such. Aemon endured them like a man letting a surgeon take a thorn from his flesh with a dull instrument. And then the hall nodded. The candles breathed lower. The Iron Throne was what it had been. The oaken chair was removed as if it had tracked mud upon the stones. His chamber was warmed by 2 braziers burning coals that had the scent of cedar mixed through. The rookery lay above and to the east, a black square that never entirely slept. He had always liked the way those rooms held sound. How a cough in one corner became a small thunderclap and a small thought sounded like a larger one when it had walls to strike. Aegon came without knocking, which was either impudent or brotherly and probably both. He closed the door with his heel and stood with his hands spread on the door's curve as if feeling for the quiver of everything beyond it. "You look as if you have been told to dine with a lion," Aegon said at last, "and given the larger chair." "I have never been comfortable at large tables," Aemon said. "They make me think of drafts in corners. Sit down. Or pace. You never were good at sitting." Aegon did both. He sat and then stood, and then crossed to the window and looked out at a city that made hard work of pretending to sleep. From the rookery above came a knock of something, not quite a beak and not quite a door. The ravens felt the world shift too, small as it was to their rough minds. "You should have refused," Aegon said, turning back. "That is what I would have wanted, if I were a better man. If you were a better man, you would not wish for anything that Alexander of myths or Daeron of records ever had. But you are a man, and I love you as one. I did not refuse." "No," Aegon said. He held Aemon's gaze and did not look away. "And now I must learn to be a prince in truth. There's mischief in me yet that has not found a badge to wear. You will make use of that mischief, brother?" "I will make use of you," Aemon said, "which will be worse. There is a difference between a crook in a branch and the shadow it throws at noon. I would have you stand at my right hand when it suits, and behind me when it is called for, and elsewhere when it is better yet. I would have you contradict me in rooms where my temper might rise and listen to me in rooms where yours does. And I would have you tell me when a man lies to me, for I have learned to cure fevers and sort lies by pattern. But yours is the talent that hears the false step. And if I fail you, you will, and I will fail you. That is how men proceed." Aemon walked to the table. The light there slipped along quills with their points laid to dry after honing. "There is another thing. You will be named Prince of Dragonstone and heir-in-law. That must be made plain as spring." Aegon smiled briefly and tiredly. "I had thought to be king one day, and when I thought it, I was ashamed for thinking it. Perhaps I should have allowed the shame to be a lesson. You will have a son, and then what am I but a remembered branch?" "I will have no son," Aemon said, and his own words struck him in the ribs like a soft mallet. He rested his hands on the table as if he had been surprised by a step down hidden by shadow. "Or rather, I do not know what I will have. I know what I ought to have, but I know too what vows mean. I will put down the chain because the realm has taken what the chain cannot include, but I cannot put down what it made in me. I do not say I will never wed. I say I will not make of a woman and a child a matter of tidying an argument. If I have children, it will be because there was a day when I could do no other than love. And that day, Aegon, has not been given me yet. So you will name me, Aegon said simply. And the lords will measure my coat and weigh my purse and do their accounts with my pride factored and my wit discounted. They think me a boy still. They think me a story. I have given them reason to think so. They have not seen me when things grow quiet inside me. I will give you what I have. I know, Aemon said, and they stood together a moment, companionable with their griefs like two men sharing a cup of cold water at a sickbed. Ser Duncan will be needed, Aegon said, as if remembering something that had waited politely in his mind. He will bring in the dust from country lanes on his boots, and they will frown at him, and it will make me glad. I will speak to him, Aemon said. If I choose him for white, I will be told all the reasons why I am wrong, and perhaps I will be wrong and yet correct. If I do not choose him, I will not be able to bear our talk the day after tomorrow. Aegon laughed, and the sound was kinder than many of the vows men swear. The summons reached Brynden Rivers as good bows reach marks. He came with his odd quiet, a cloak thrown over one shoulder like an absent-minded bird. The years had carved his face into a set of ridges that did not change much with talk, and one eye had grown pale as old milk while the other retained a careful darkness. He smelled faintly of must and fir and some resin he burned when the candles made him ache. The hall he preferred had a window that faced the east and held dawn like water in a pitcher. You called your... He began, and stopped because he had nearly said a word that would not be settled until the septon poured oil and placed a crown where a chain had been. Aemon. Brynden, Aemon said. He had not called this man Bloodraven since they were both young enough to enjoy the taste of nicknames upon the tongue. It felt like giving a sword a child's pet name, and swords did not appreciate that. We have a piece of business between us, old as the day it was done. The one dark I narrowed. There was always a calculation in Brynden, and it never alone. There was calculation and fatigue, calculation and pity, calculation, and taste for danger. Enys Blackfire, he said softly, and what was written in the air when he was coaxed to come. What was written was safe conduct, Aemon said, and what was done was murder. You will tell me you waited to act until he came without guard enough to fracture the city. You will tell me that a fight in the streets would have cost lives we could count and not count. You will tell me that stones fall and cannot be set back in the tower in precisely the order they fell. I will tell you the boy was a better corpse than a king, Brynden said, and that I spared you and your brother the sorrow of a war, and spared the realm as well, and that if sins must be weighed, the scale still wavers. The scale will settle in my court, Aemon said. He did not speak the other thought, which was that sins often weighed themselves upon the souls of the men who made them. He had not yet decided what he would do with Brynden. He had not decided because he did not know whether he valued oaths above outcomes or outcomes above oaths when both were large, and a man could only afford to pretend to be consistent for so long. Do you mean to kill me? Brynden asked it like a practical matter. No, Aemon said, and watched surprise cross the older man's face with the miniature drama of a cloud springing from nowhere and emptying itself. But I cannot keep your counsel near me once I am crowned. I do not think it fit that you should sit at the small table and tell me where I must look when your shadow lies over the ground I walk. If I spare you, men will say I pay for murder with friendship. If I kill you, men will say I repay service with cruelty. The one thing men will not say, because they cannot, is that I mean to be done with the habit that allows the king's men to break words when words become inconvenient. And so, Brynden invited, and so I will send you to the wall, Aemon said. It cost him something to say it, because he knew the wall ate men who were necessary to many other places. You will take the black and teach the crows your patience. I will send you north with the best of my supplies and a caravan that will irritate the lords who must watch it climb the King's Road and think of the coin it represents. You will go as if you are honored, which will anger your enemies because they are small, and comfort your friends because they are fewer than you think. Brynden considered it as a chess master might consider an exchange of queens. He glanced sidelong at the window, where the light lifted a single speck of dust and made it bright, and then let it go again. "I would like to say you are a fool," he said. "But if fools are measured by the number of nights they sleep without hearing the names of the dead they gave permission to make, you will sleep better than I have. If fools are measured by the number of wars they avert and the number they invite, we will not know until winter has counted for us. I will go." "You will go," Aemon repeated, "and I will make it plain why. They will curse me from Lys to Lannisport for it, and I will endure it. There is a word that must hold for kings and for boys without cloaks alike, or there is nothing. You will need a man who keeps knowledge if I go," Brynden said. "Someone who knows the alleyways and the whisper places. Someone given to listening where conversation thinks itself alone. There are men like that. None of them will be my friend." "I will not ask for your recommendations," Aemon said, and allowed himself a small smile that he did not feel. "I will make that sin on my own." When Brynden had gone, the room felt taller by a finger's width, and the air hung oddly, as if someone had moved a candle in a draft. Aemon took up his pen and wrote a letter to the Citadel, learned and formal, with phrases that had the chill of marble about them. He did not ask permission to lay down his chain. He announced the fact as one announces a death that is not negotiable. He praised the wisdom of men he would no longer answer to, and commended the diligence of young ones who would never sit at tables of state. He named one of his former instructors with warmth and another with the polite omission that is a small act of malice. When he had sanded the letter and left it to rest, he wrote a shorter message to the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, which began with regret and turned, like a stone turned in the hand, to resolve. He suggested a schedule of supply that would not be a schedule at all, no pattern to invite thieves, but enough steadiness that men at the end of the world knew they had not been forgotten by the middle of it. He ended that letter with his name without title and the last flourish of the Maester's mark he had always used. He would choose the new seal when the crown had tasted his head. The morning they named him king, the light came late and sullen, as if the sky had been given the same news and resented it. He rode in a carriage for the people's sake, with the glass scratched and wavering so that faces in the street looked like a procession of men and women seen in a troubled dream. Some shouted, and some scowled, and some looked merely curious, as if a bear had been taught a trick and was being taken to show it in the square. Aemon resisted the urge to peer too closely at their faces. He did not want to recognize anyone triumphant or broken. He did not want to remember them later. He wanted, absurdly, to be a man who could be crowned like any other man is given a task. Take it home, set it on the shelf above the boot scrape, and get on with the day. The sept was cool and smelled of oil and incense. The high septon touched Aemon's brow with a practiced tenderness that was somehow not tender at all. He prayed as men pray when their minds are busy with the ordering of lists. When the crown came down, it came heavy and not entirely well balanced, as if it had been designed for some other head and never resized. Aemon thought, oh, an old story from the Citadel that involved a frog and a borrowed helm and a well, and he forbore to smile. He murmured the words and signed the parchment and rose to his new name. He did not look back at the benches where the maesters sat as politely as retired swords at a wedding. Back in the Red Keep, he set the crown upon the table's cloth and regarded it with an attention he would not have granted a cask of gold. The chain he took from his throat and laid beside it, and only then did he realize his hands had begun to shake. He placed them flat upon the wood until they learned their old skill at stillness. He expected to feel differently, as if some new room had been added to the house of his mind. There was only the weight of the new metal upon the table. He went to the window and looked out at the city and said aloud to no one in all, "Now I will make fewer mistakes than the last man, and more than the next." The White Sword Tower received him that afternoon with a bright crispness. The 7 sworn brothers were not yet 7, and there lay in the air the question of who else would be invited to wear the white, a question that rustled like silk. The White Book was brought out for the new king, a thick binder of the sort that seduces a scholar into reading beyond sense. Aemon drew back his hands that had reached in spite of him and asked for the Lord Commander. The Lord Commander was a lean, spare knight with a face that showed his bones as if he had been drawn on parchment. He bowed, as men of zeal bow when their zeal is not quite sure whether the person before them deserves it. "Your Grace, Sire," Aemon said, and spoke names and courtesy, and then he said, "I will name a new brother today, if I may usurp my own hand and your right to advise." The Lord Commander's mouth tightened, then relaxed. "It is within your rights, your Grace. Many kings have named who suited them, though not all came to be that name's friend. I will be this one's friend," Aemon said, and when the door opened and Ser Duncan the Tall came in, he felt something in him ease that had been tightened since the hall the night before. "Ser Duncan," he said, "you come as a man who has done as much good as fate allows any man of your station to do in a lifetime. If there is a thing worth making of a man, it is to give him an office that allows him to make more of what he is. Will you wear white for me?" A cough sounded from the back of the room. It was the polite cough of one who sees a custom being handled clumsily. The Lord Commander did not cough. His face did something smaller and more difficult. Ser Duncan stood as if considering that his own hands were attached to his wrists, and then he knelt so suddenly that the benches flinched. "I will," he said simply, as if he had been invited to share bread. The cloak fell over Duncan's broad shoulders like snow on a low roof. It seemed impossible that a garment could turn a man into an idea so quickly. Aemon watched it happen with both relief and unease. He signed the book. He spoke the words. When he stepped forward to clasp Duncan's newly white shoulder, he looked up because he must, and in that moment he felt precisely what it was to measure one's reach in inches. Ser Duncan's mouth bent, and his eyes flooded with a gratitude that could not find a way to express itself without looking foolish. "Your Grace," he said, and cleared his throat and failed to say the thing he wanted, which had to do with roads and small folk and old breakfasts beneath hedges and the fact that what you owe to a man is sometimes the last thing you ever thought you would owe anybody. The first days went like river water over stones. Aemon learned the patterns of petitioners. Men who came in with their grievances rehearsed like songs they hoped would catch a courtier's ear. Women whose wrongs had learned to speak as fact because they were thick with the weight of living with them. There were men who wanted the king to undo physics with a gesture. There were men and women who only needed a witness stronger than a neighbor. Aemon sat, and he placed the crown on his brow when it was required and on the table when it was not. He heard, and the hearing grew into a discipline like a prayer you begin to understand only on the 100th repetition. He ate little, and he slept like a man who remembered the structure of sleep but had misplaced the habit of it. He walked in the gardens late after the grooms had passed and the last of the lovers had found the shade no longer safe. He found himself in the kitchens one night, the steam and the fat and the vegetables like an army charged with boiling. He spoke with a boy whose duty it was to polish pewter, and the boy spoke with a bravery that stood on the third rung of terror and would not climb higher. Aemon learned the names of 3 dogs who roamed with low, analytical expressions. He asked questions of the men who baked bread and the women who salted fish, and he learned the numbers not in sweetness, and the numbers said plainly why flour was suddenly dearer and why the fishermen stared at the river as if suspecting it of theft. He made notes on a wax tablet because paper made courtiers nervous when a king held it too often. The small council reassembled in parts, like a traveling troupe called onto a stage where the play had changed in the night. Aemon let it take shape as one allows a tree to take shape, pruning where it would make a branch stronger and leaving a twist that, while unhandsome, might produce fruit. He named no spy master. He would wait to see who among his advisors listened better than he spoke. He named the master of coin a man with a habit of tapping a forefinger against his own temple when he thought. Tapping suggested an anxiety Aemon trusted. The master of laws had written a treatise once on river rights that had been so dry the drought seemed to follow him from court to court. Aemon valued him because the man had no gift for charming words and so preferred correct ones. He asked Aegon to sit with them and never warned him when a question would be placed in his lap. Sometimes Aegon's reply was wrong but bracing, leaving in its wake the memory of what it was to be brave without counsel. Sometimes Aegon said nothing at all and only looked at the faces around the little table as if he were memorizing the peculiarities of a landscape he would one day be expected to cross blindfolded. Letters arrived so often they might as well have come with the bread. From the Reach, Someone reminded the new king of an old promise and a newer slight that had been tendered in the voice of a joke. From the Westerlands came congratulations as polished as the gold that funded them. The Ironborn wrote, as they often did, shortly, and with the wiry music of contempty courtesy. Dorne's message was like a cup in which a generous wine had been poured and then sipped with care so not to leave a mark. The North wrote in their steady hand, a letter like a plank, and Aemon liked it better than any other for all its lack of compliments. None of the letters said what the writers said to their intimates, and Aemon did not mind. He only asked the few men he trusted to report the difference between the words on paper and the words behind teeth, and they brought him both and a few guesses besides. He walked a city then, and found himself surprised by it as one is surprised by a man you have known at a distance for many years and then hear sing. The street of silk, stretched with its twilight promises and its daylight realities, could not disguise from him the women who lived within it, nor the men who did. Aemon made a list in his wax of what could be done that had nothing to do with moralities and everything to do with disease and hunger and winter. He did not bleed a sermon onto the stone. He wrote candles and clean water, and a man to count the gutters, and wood for doors in the storm season. In the rookery, he coaxed a raven onto his arm and felt the familiar rough of the feet through his sleeve and the feathered weight of a creature that is less a bird than a memory of birds. He whispered to it. He had always whispered to ravens as if to a child who will never learn your name, and this one twisted its head and regarded him with a patience that could be mistaken for ignorance. He sent letters north and then north again, and one to a small keep on a river bend in the Riverlands whose lord he had met once as a very young man traveling with a half-drunk archmaester intent on recording the eccentricities of minor river gods. That man had had a way of asking questions as if every answer might be the first good bread he had tasted in a month. He asked him now for a census of fishermen and their nets. He asked him, obliquely, to tell him whether a particular sell-sail company had been seen near the mouths of certain rivers, company regarded who wore black as if it were a chessboard color. Near the end of the second week of his reign, a Tyroshi envoy came with a beard groomed as if it were a second person to be maintained and a scent of orange blossoms that clung to tapestries like gossip. He made compliments with the extravagance that passes for sincerity when one has never needed to be sincere, and he said, as if in passing, that men had been hired many men, and ships had been loaded, and an island had been visited more than such an island merited, and the man known as Bittersteel had been seen once, by a boy who had a gift for seeing men he should not see. Aemon sat back in his chair and felt the bones of it press into his shoulders. He had expected such a shape to appear in the fog. He was not sure it comforted him to know he had been right. "When will they come?" he asked, and the envoy's smile was the smile of a man who knows the worth of refusing to name a day. When the envoy had gone, Aegon came and sat on the edge of the table as if it had been made for him, which it had not. He tapped the crown with a knuckle, an affectionate insult. "They will test you," he said. "It would be impolite otherwise." "I will be polite in my reply," Aemon said. "You will send a fleet?" "I will send letters first. I will send men with eyes who have sailed rough water. I will send something they cannot see coming, which is patience." "Patience cannot take a head," Aegon said. "It can keep one," Aemon said. "Yours and mine, and those of men who will never know they are protected from a certain kind of stupidity." They were still talking when Ser Duncan knocked once and came in without waiting for the answer. His white cloak was already earning smudges. Armor and purity have very different notions of cleanliness. "Your Grace," he said, and Aemon thought he would never tire of the grave way the big man placed those words in the air, like stones in a causeway. "There is a boy in the yard. He has come with a story that is either nothing or just enough. He asked for you. Let him tell his story to someone else," the Lord Commander had said earlier that day when a different petition had been brought. "Everyone will ask for the king now. If the king listens to everyone, the king will never sleep." "I will listen," Aemon said now, and Duncan inclined his head with a satisfaction that was not wholly professional. The boy they brought in was not as small as Duncan's gentling had made him sound. He had the wrapped-up look of someone who had been cold for a long time and had learned to keep his warmth gathered in the middle of his chest. He had the quick eyes of a dog that is never certain if a hand will lift to pet or strike. He had a nick on his lip that had been allowed to scab and then had been worried at with a tooth. It was raw again. "Your Grace," he said, in a voice that made it clear he had learned that title the way one learns an inn sign, by listening. "Tell me what you told Ser Duncan," Aemon said, and the boy swallowed because saying, "Gee, something twice often costs more than saying it once." "They came by the river," the boy said, "not sailing, riding along it the way a man might ride a fence. They wore plain things but carried their heads like men who wait to be named and expect everyone else to call them by a name they have not given yet. I hid." His chin lifted a fraction. "I hide well. It is a talent. One of them had a pin on his cloak. I have no letters, Your Grace, but I remember shapes. It was a black thing. A bird," he said finally, and lifted his hands uselessly at the failing of words. "But not a raven. A stronger thing. More like he faltered. "A crowned black dragon," Aegon said without looking at Aemon. The boy nodded, cautious about the error he might be making in agreeing. "You did well to come," Aemon said. He had a pouch of coins in his desk and took out 2 to place in the boy's hand. 2 was enough to make him proud of his cunning, and not enough to make drunkards follow him home. "And you will do better still by telling the Master of Laws exactly where you watched and where you think they crossed. Ser Duncan will take you there. You will keep your skill. I will hope not to have to ask you to use it again." The boy's eyes filled and did not spill, and then he swallowed twice and gripped the coins like he had been handed a privilege. When they had gone, Aegon leaned his knuckles against the table. "It seems they will not wait," he said. "Men who think themselves wronged never do," Aemon replied. He took up his tablet, wrote Watch Fairies and then Golden Company, and then Mander at Third Gate, and then, for his own memory's sake, Don't trust the smell of orange blossoms. He put down the stylus and rubbed his brow where the crown had found a place to be comfortable. "Will you ride out?" Aegon asked. "I will not," Aemon said. "I will let those who are made to ride out do that, and I will do the thing that undoes the reason these men think they can gather. They think me weak because I wore a chain. I will unteach them that," he said and smiled, and the smile would have made Brynden Rivers wary if he had been in the room to see it. The law issued in the week that followed did not seem grand when written out in the round hand of the scribe. It required that each lord declare the size of his private levy and the source of his coin in the next season. It required that an accounting of grain be kept and reported, not for punishment but for prediction, and it excused a measure of tax from towns that kept a certain number of loaves in their public ovens for times of flood and fever. It insisted, with what looked like pedantry and was actually an assumption of crown prerogative, that the ferries upon certain rivers be kept staffed and open past dusk. It forbade the poisoning of dogs as a remedy to plague without a council of 3 healers agreeing, and the healers were to be named by the nearest sept, or by the Lord's Castellan if no sept stood within a day's ride, and the names were to be sent to the Red Keep and written down with a wax color that meant kindness. The law did these things and did, in a small clause near the end, something else besides. Something that made men squirm and that pleased no one whose pleasure Aemon cared about. It required the lords who still had ties to exiled cousins to declare, on their honor and in writing, that no coin or promise would go east from their lands, and to place their names under that statement in a fashion that made the forgery of them a sacral act. When the law was read aloud in 3 languages in 3 squares, the small clause slid into the minds of the few men it had been made for, like the note that only those with a certain ear ever hear. Aemon called it small government. He did not call it that aloud. Kings do not joke about their size. He called it housekeeping and learned it was a word that made men either respect you or hate you, and you could not predict which until the line was drawn. He began to receive replies, little letters from villages with 9 houses that had never been asked a thing by a king before, and thick, careful letters from men who governed cities and worried about the shape of a regulation the way a blacksmith worries about iron and water. There were angry letters too, and one that came in ink so faint its writer must have diluted it with tears or with the memory of something like tears. The law had gone out with the king's seal on it, and the thing about seals is that they allow men to call their courage something other than what it is. A lord of middling consequence wrote to say that his sister's husband once wore a different badge than he does today. But men change, do they not, your grace? And can you require of me that I cut off my own hands? Aemon put that letter aside and did not answer it for 3 days, because sometimes time writes the answer on the edges. During those days, he went down to the yards and watched men practice with spear and sword. He watched them as a surgeon watches a fever, without romance, interested in pattern and outcome, not spectacle. He made no remark about a certain way of holding a pike that loosened the grip. He only noticed who held it wrong and who corrected him without cruelty, and he spoke those names later to the Master-at-Arms as if he had asked a question about the roof. At night he read history, law, the accounts of kingdoms that had curled up and died and put their bones out for the worms because they had forgotten to mind the small, stubborn things that make a realm not glorious but possible. He read and he stopped and put the book aside and went to the window to look at the city. He discovered he had begun, without meaning to count the lights, to judge by them how men felt about the day. There were nights when the city was a piece of black velvet with a few stitches of gold, and there were nights when it was a spilled treasure, glittering and a little cruel for glit, tearing so in a place where men slept cold. When the first news of a skirmish came, it came oddly, by way of a fisherman who had cut 3 men out of ropes when their small boat had lost its temper and tried to drown them. They were mercenaries, not very good ones, with the little sullen pride of men who think to be paid for a habit instead of a craft. One had a coin stamped with a sign Aemon had seen once on a field where men had been cut down because they had believed longer than was reasonable. Another had a letter with the corner torn and the rest wet and blurred. Aemon held the ruin up and could make out, for a moment and then never again, a double line drawn under the words stepstone and passage. It felt like picking up the outer shell of an egg and trying to guess the chick's health. The fairies have held, Aegon said, pleased like a boy whose trick has worked on a rude uncle. They have, Aemon said, and allowed himself to think of the boy who had hid well and spoken with his jaw set tight. Some men he jailed whom he would rather have exiled, and some men he exiled whom he would rather have jailed. He learned that choices seldom come two together and labeled, and when they do, the label has been written by the man who wants you to pick the wrong one. In the council, he argued because it kept his mind limber. With Aegon, he argued because it kept his heart honest. With Ser Duncan, he spoke as one speaks to an old tree that has stood by the same road all your life. And even if it has no advice, you do not go that road without patting its bark. On a morning that had the clear light of early autumn in it, a letter arrived in a hand Aemon recognized as if he had watched the letters form in the air. It was from a woman he had known at Old Town in those days when a book could still be a friend and not a weapon. She wrote to say she had begun to fear the citadel, had grown suspicious of its own brightness, and had begun to hate darkness out of proportion to its crimes. She wrote to say that whispers had begun, whispers that the king who had worn a chain would use it as a leash for all men who wore one still. She wrote to say that men had been sent out to watch the king's new law and measure its intent from a distance, as if it were a bird under a thick glass. She wrote to say she missed his habit of listening. She ended without blessing. He put the letter down and wished, for a moment longer than wisdom allows, to be a man in a brown robe with ink on his thumb. He replied that same day with a letter that was not political. He asked what books she was reading, and told her the ones he kept at his bedside and the ones he left on an outer table so he might pretend he was not the sort of man to read them before sleep. He asked after a boy at the Citadel who had a gift for seeing how small things made larger ones function and a weakness for placing his thoughts into complicated boxes. He thanked her, with more warmth than was advisable, for taking the time to tell him what she had told him. He sealed that letter with no flourish at all, as if it had been a shopping list. He walked into the sept one afternoon without telling his guard and sat in the last bench beneath a window where dust danced in the light as if it had been waiting for just the right moment to be alive. A woman with a child on her hip steadied the boy's head with a rough tenderness. A man 2 benches up had his hands clasped together like a necessary violence. Aemon did not pray. He had learned at the Citadel that prayer was a sort of apprenticeship to oneself, and he was too proud for apprenticeships he had not chosen. He sat and listened to the murmurs around him and the tiny noises of the building itself. The wood creak, the stone sigh, a mouse that had misjudged its route. He put his palm flat against the bench and felt the old strength of seasoned oak, and he thought of his own chain and the crown and how neither was wood, and how they both would be melted down or stolen away one day, and the oak might still be here then, and it should please him more than it did. The first time he saw the Blackfire banner with his new eyes, it was a curtain of 3 breaths' length on a hill near a road he had ridden as a boy. He was not there. He saw it in a drawing sent by a squire who had found it hung upon a dead branch and had the sense to sketch it rather than ride back with it like a cocky fool. The black dragon had been roughly wrought, but the hand that had made it had cared. There was a heart-sore pride in the line of the wing, and Aemon felt it as one feels the grain of wood under his fingers. He wondered at feeling, even then, the appeal of a thing that would kill him if it could. He turned the drawing over. The squire had practiced writing his name on the back, twice, with a care that made Aemon ache. He wrote the squire a letter in which he said 2 things. Thank you, and be careful of the way your hand runs away when you are proud of it. He sent also a knife that had belonged to a man Aemon had once liked and then had disliked because the man had named all his virtues too loudly. The knife had a good weight and a small flaw that taught you where to place your thumb. Aegon came in at dusk, laughing with a man whose name Aemon could not recall, and the laughter died when the man realized he had brought it into a room where laughter did not expect to live. Aegon winked at Aemon without shame and shooed his companion away with a gesture that was either affectionate or dismissive or both. I have a thought, he said. It may be a foolish one. All thoughts are foolish at dusk, Aemon said. They become less so by morning or by time's refusal to move. You should marry, Aegon said, all at once, like a man tossing a stone into a deep well to see how long the silence lasts. Not now, not in panic, but soon enough that men looking east will have to rethink in the middle of their rethinking. There is a kind of fey. Men have of kings who are properly landed in the world, kings who father children, who tie themselves to houses that have their own complexities. You will have enemies either way, but the enemies you will have if you do not marry will be the sort who love to call a king empty. And the woman? Aemon asked, not smiling. Shall we try on 12 noble daughters for the sake of the market? Shall we weigh their father's debts? I do not resent you the thought, Aegon. I resent the world for making me entertain it. You need not resent it alone, Aegon said, and set a hand on the back of the chair. But hear me. There is a house in the Stormlands with a girl whose mother died and whose father is a decent sort and not ambitious enough to cripple us with his favor. There is a house in the Vale with a widow who has learned that the world will go on without a husband and might, for that very reason, make a better one. There is Dorne for peace and the Reach for bread and the North for bones. I am the one to bring names, you said. I bring them. You will throw them away if you like. I will not do anything if I like ever again, Aemon said. But he took the names as one takes a handful of seed and placed them somewhere he trusted himself to go back to. Ser Duncan says, Aegon added, with a cheerfulness too casual to be accidental, that you should choose a woman who will tell you when you are collecting books to avoid a decision. Ser Duncan should consider the way his 2 top buttons fail to align on his court doublet, Aemon said. It undermines the Kingsguard's reputation for perfection. He will consider it, Aegon said gravely, and he will not fix it. He prefers to be imperfect in a way that tells the truth about him. The night eased around them. The city yawned. Somewhere a singer found a song everyone knew and did not sing it very well, but the crowd sang it with him because memory is not particular about quality. Aemon sat with the mild ache at the base of his skull that had begun since the crown, and he thought of a woman whose hair had smelled of mint in the Citadel gardens and who had been impatient with dogma and gentle with cats. He thought of vows. He thought of the way his hand had trembled only after he had put down the chain. He thought of ravens, and of the wall, that line of stone and old magic and human stubbornness where Brynden Rivers was climbing stairs he had once thought himself too good to climb. He wondered whether Brynden slept, and whether the wind there had different words for snow. The weeks braided themselves. A man from Gulltown came with a map he had drawn on a sailcloth that had seen better days, and explained with a fervor that outstripped his cartography that certain currents were not as men think, and thus certain ships might be where a sensible man would not look. Aemon had the map copied onto a proper sheet and sent both map and man to the master of ships, whom he trusted about as much as one trusts a fox with a pocketful of feathers. He did not trust the man. He trusted the office to make use of the thing. In the far reaches, small troubles began to declare themselves as if to remind the king that the throat he guarded was not the only place a body might die from. In a village near the neck, a band of men had taken the habit of calling themselves by a name they had carved into an oak. Aemon sent them a clerk with 2 guards and 3 sermons on the subject of taxes. 2 months later, the band had joined the garrison in a tower over a river ford and discovered that men who are given a task feel less cheated by the world than men who find their tasks for themselves. In the Reach, a landlord watered wine until it was not wine but a liquid that remembered it had once known grapes. Aemon did not care, but men fell sick, and then he cared, and the man was led through his own market with no fruit thrown and a good silence following him like a dog that has forgiven its master for a beating and wonders now if it was its fault. He wrote a decree that made it easier for men who had been soldiers to become builders because he was not sentimental and because buildings last longer than wars. He set a small purse aside for a woman whose sons had been killed in a skirmish that never mattered to anyone beyond the hill where it happened. And he did not send that purse as king but as Aemon, and he signed it with the last bit of his old sigil as if he were making mischief at the borders of his own authority. When the first letter came from the wall with Brynden River's hand upon it, it was brief and precise and not unkind. He wrote of men who had forgotten that standing in one place does not only mean one thing. He wrote of ravens that refuse to fly on nights when the cold makes sound carry farther than sense. He wrote, in a closed sentence at the end, "I do not regret it yet," which could mean anything from "I was right in all I did" to "I have not yet had time to regret." And Aemon let it be and sent back flour and candles and a certain kind of oil for hinges that a castle in that climate will devour. There were days when Aemon did not feel like a king but like a man wearing several coats at once, sweating under their weight, unable to take one off without freezing under the others. And there were days when something like joy slipped under the door and sat with him a while. And in those days he thought perhaps the work of a king is to be the man who stands at the window when the rest of the house is sleeping and looks out at the night to see whether it is still there, and because he stands, it is. In a room with a low ceiling where the light spilled over the rough surface of a trestle table and made of it a map of another world, Aemon spoke to Ser Duncan without court and without white cloak present, because a man should sometimes be free of the mantles he has promised to carry. They drank small beer and ate a cheese that had survived the journey from a hill he would never visit. "Do you miss the road?" Aemon asked. "I miss the part of it that tells you the shape of the next day," Ser Duncan replied after a moment. "The road speaks to you if you watch it right. Here, the floor is all the same. But there is a thing here the road cannot give you." "What's that?" Aemon asked, and Duncan smiled. "A slow, private thing. The chance to keep a promise where everyone can see," he said. "On the road, promises are like coins, spent in small places, remembered by the man who took them and never spoken of again. In a city, in a court, a promise can be a wall. A promise can make other men stand straighter. And if you break it?" Aemon asked. "Then the whole place gets bent," Duncan said. "You have not broken one yet. It counts for something." Aemon looked at the white cloak hung like a curtain at the edge of his vision. He had chosen, in the days since, for more men for that same office, and each choice had felt like placing a stone in a strange building whose architecture he only half understood. "There will be a day," he said, "when the promise will cost someone I love something I would rather not spend. Then you will test me." "We test you every day by standing in your sight," Duncan replied, "whether we mean to or not." A messenger brought word that someone at court had been speaking to a cousin who liked to speak to men who liked to speak to men who crossed the narrow sea with professional intent. Aegon told him this with the faint satisfaction of a boy who has discovered money where money should not have been. Aemon sat and made a list of people who would be angry if the cousin were punished and people who would be delighted if he were and people who would be bored by both. He wrote the cousin a letter that said precisely nothing and made him read it several times looking for the thing it contained. It contained only the knowledge that the king knew his name. Sometimes Aemon had found that was enough to change a man's behavior. A king's attention is a strange medicine. He walked the yard with Aegon. They watched a boy loose arrows at a wicker man, and the arrows most often found the wicker's stout thigh or its ill-shaped shoulder. Once, an arrow struck where the thickness had been haphazardly achieved with a wad of straw and passed through as if through nothing. The boy looked astonished. Aegon laughed. "We all aim for the place that looks impenetrable," he said. "We do not always notice where the straw is thin." "Noted," Aemon said, and thought of ships passing along not quite common channels. In his bedchamber, the crown sat on the table where he had placed it on the first day. He did not keep it on a cushion. He was not a man for cushions. He set it where a hand might knock it in the night if the hand went too far. He had knocked it once and had woken at the thud and had felt, in the dark, with his fingers, for its iron cold and the nicks along its inner edge where men who had worn it before him had cut themselves in haste. He had not cut himself yet. He did not know whether that meant prudence or an untested aptitude for pain. When he dreamed of ravens, not as symbols but as birds, heavy, irritable, greedy for glinting things. They pulled at his chain and at his crown and argued with one another in a scrabble of feet and wing. When he woke, he would lie very still and listen to the castle breathing. Stone settles with shifts. Mice run their private errands 2 floors below. He had meant to keep the habit of going each week to a room where men were in pain and learn there again the humility of being useless sometimes. The habit failed him more often than it held. When he did go, he washed his hands carefully and spoke to a woman whose child had a fever that was traveling through his body like a patient lord visiting vassals. He fed the child a spoonful of a decoction and watched the boy's eyelids flutter. He spoke to the father, who had the quiet that comes of having had the worst sentence pronounced upon you twice and then lifted once. He left the place thinking of how men bear things when they are alone, and how badly they bear them when they think they are, and how there are fewer of us alone than we like to believe because it flatters our pride to be solitary. The war that had been promised took shape not in a roar but in a series of unhandsome noises. As a house collapses through the night far away, it begins with a crack not quite a crack, and something you cannot name loosens, and then a beam yields. Men landed on a stony shore that had not asked for them and paid a boy to show them a path that had been known to shepherds for 3 generations. Aemon received the report with the taste of ash in his mouth that was not ash but anticipation of it. He sent a command written in a phrase so short it looked like insult. He sent a man with a note no one else was to read. He signed a writ allowing a certain canyon to be closed with brush and spiked saplings. He looked at 3 maps. He wrote 3 letters, 2 of which would be intercepted by the men who thought themselves clever and 1 of which would arrive in the hand he wanted. He slept poorly and woke with clear eyes and sent Ser Duncan to a place where he would be remembered by men who had never heard of him until that day. When news came of a company scattered neatly across gullies that a man might pass on a bright day without noticing, Aemon allowed himself a single breath of relief. He had not chased anything yet. He had let the land do what the land was made to do. He had made sure the men doing it were the sort who would not take credit beyond their share, and the men who had been beaten were the sort who would not write to him to explain why. He wrote a letter to a lord who had offered 100 men too late and thanked him with such warmth that the man wrote again immediately to say that in fact the men had been sent earlier, but something must have gone awry with the plan, and he would remedy the thing at once. Aemon put both letters aside with a satisfaction that was not quite noble. After 3 months, the city began to forgive him his chain in small ways. A singer invented a song in which a king counted coppers because coppers count you as well as you count them. The song was better than its maker and worse than its idea, and everyone sang it because the refrain was easy. A butcher told a story in the market of how the king had told him to keep a pig alive 1 day longer because it was not the pig's fault he was out of salt. Aemon never remembered telling him that. He remembered buying salt with a name and having been embarrassed at the attention. He did not mind the story replacing the fact, because it contained more truth than the event had. Aegon grew sharper in the way men grow when they have discovered that jokes will only carry you so far, and that laughter takes you into certain rooms and out of others. He argued with the Master of Coin one afternoon with a ferocity that made the older man blink and then smile and then look deeply annoyed and then look across the table at Aemon with something like respect. Later, Aegon came and sat on the same window ledge he had favored since boyhood. "It irritates them," he said, "that I know what a bushel is, It will do them good, Aemon said. Much of government is simple quantities. It is the quantities that hide themselves that make the murders. When winter sent its finger out and laid it on the city's lips, Aemon sent a letter to the Lord of Winterfell without any preamble. He asked what he needed, not as a king asking for tribute, but as a neighbor asking through the hedge. The answer came in a single page: timber and iron, but also one particular kind of lentil, which men in the south did not think of as a winter food, and a request for 2 masons skilled in the old way of joining stone without metal. Aemon sent what he could and added a cask of cider he had never liked but was told northern men did. He received in return an elk hide that smelled of a country he had never seen and a letter that said, in its last line, "The night is long but we are not." He put that letter near the one from the Citadel woman, the one that smelled faintly of rosemary. He kept them both in a drawer he could unlock in the dark. In the spring he went out. It is not good for a king to be only a piece of news. He rode to a village that had lost a bridge to a flood and promised them a better one with pilings set deeper. He stood in the mud and spoke to a girl who had climbed onto a stone to watch him. He asked her what stones say when they watch kings, and she laughed because he had given her permission to find him ridiculous. He rode on, and at an inn he ate a stew in which a cook had placed carrots with a confidence he did not possess, and drank water from a cup with a line of cracks that made flowers where no flowers were. At night, under an old tower where bats had acquired the habit of using a window men had forgotten, Aemon watched Ser Duncan sleep, arms flung, mouth slightly open, a man at peace with whatever the day would do. He envied him that once, but he had learned to envy no one the shape of their dreaming. He dreamed a different dream that night, a field in which books grew and men harvested them with scythes, and every time a man cut, the blade dulled if the book had been any good. He woke with a start and laughed at himself, quietly and alone, as men do when they surprise themselves by being harmless. Trouble broke again in a place where Aemon had permitted himself to expect quiet. That is a thing trouble does when it is a student of men. A minor lord with a face made for stubbornness and a talent for breathing without learning had taken 2 merchants' daughters into his hold because they had refused his steward the usage fee for crossing his land. Aemon did not send knights. He sent a lawyer and a white cloak and a young boy who wrote quickly. They arrived and found the girls unharmed and angry. The lord blustered. Ser Duncan said nothing at all and stood in the doorway until silence made the lord embarrassed at his own voice. The lawyer read the clause in the new law about passage fees and common rights in a tone that suggested this was a matter like rain, unavoidable and not personal. The boy wrote and wrote and wrote. When Aemon read the report, he felt the satisfaction of a shape becoming clear and regretted that he had not taken the ride himself to stand in that doorway and watch the silence do its work. The Blackfire pretensions did not come to a head that season. They ripened as some fruits do past sweetness into something like chemical truth, one taste and you know what is possible now and what is not. Aemon met a man in a cloak of unadorned brown who had once followed a black banner and listened while the man explained the attraction of a cause that will never admit to wanting bread. Aemon gave him bread, real bread that broke with weight in the hand. The man wept because he had been made to think there was more nobility in starving. And sometimes it takes much time to teach a man to ease his pride enough to take a loaf. If there was a day Aemon began to feel himself king, not with pleasure, but with that calm one needs when the wind wants to strip you. Perhaps it was the day he declined to be carried to a hall with a cracked tile, and instead walked the long way because he had decided he would not allow his body to learn the line of ease. Or perhaps it was the day he signed the paper that said a certain man would be tried for something men like him were seldom tried for, and he did not tremble after. Or perhaps, and more likely, it was no day at all, but 100 small ones, like the steps in a stair you cannot remember individually but that bring you to the landing all the same. He stood in the shade of a tree in the palace yard one afternoon and watched a raven cirque. Lou, a dot of thought against the broad idea of the sky. Aegon came and stood beside him and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "There is a rumor that you intend to build a college for engineers." "There is," Aemon said, amused. "I had not known that yet." He had known it. He had made a list of stones and men and women who understood the way water regards gravity. He had not yet decided where to set the stones. I thought the citadel might feel it as an insult. They will, Aegon said. And then they will make friends with it because it is the polite thing to do when one has been insulted in public by a man one cannot upbraid without becoming smaller oneself. You have been watching, Aemon said. I have, Aegon replied, and his smile was the smile of a younger brother who has learned how to keep the corner of one room clean even when the others are a mess. Build your college. Teach men how to make bridges that do not leave homes floating downstream. Teach women too, he added, and laughed at Aemon's blinking. Yes, I said it. They carry water. They see how walls fail. They will build better ones because they have watched them fail. Aemon felt the pleasure of being corrected by someone you trust. We will teach anyone we can trust to build, he said, and we will learn which men think it an insult that a woman knows a thing. Do not look to me for those names, Aegon said. I will be busy that day telling jokes in rooms that need them and doing sums in rooms that hate them. When the first stone was set for the school he had not meant to want, Aemon was not there. He was at a table with a man who thought a particular tax should be increased because it was too easy. Aemon made him show his numbers. The man blustered and then produced figures that did not like being seen. Aemon let him talk his way into a corner and then put the paper aside and said, I will think on it, which in the language of kings means no, and I will not make you defend this in front of men who will enjoy the defense more than the truth. When the meeting was done, he went to the courtyard and sat on a step. A guard pretended not to see him. There are few graces in a palace more precious than a guard who will pretend not to see a king. He thought of Mikar then. Stern and unsure, one of those fathers who was never better than on the day when one of his sons had been hurt and he had to hold, for a moment, the shape of all his love in hands that did not know how to cradle. He thought of the hall where he had sat down to the offer of the throne, and the way his voice had sounded when he had accepted it. Middle voice, careful, refusing grandeur, which is a way of trying for a different grandeur that may or may not arrive. He wondered if he had done the thing correctly. He wondered if there is a correctly for this. He remembered, then, the first day he had tied on the chain and looked into a glass and thought he looked less like himself and more like an idea of himself. He looked now for the same feeling with the crown, and he felt neither absence nor presence. He felt the work that waits in rooms that know your steps, and he stood and went to it because standing is not a plan. A raven came later with a note from Brynden Rivers. It contained a single question. Have you begun to see further? Aemon smiled at that and wrote back, No, I have begun to see nearer, and it is the nearer seeing that reveals what we have always pretended was far. He sealed it. He slept. People came to him from time to time with stories they had made for the sake of his ears. He listened and separated the bird from the feathers. A woman spoke of a fire that had burned too fast and a man who had stood too long before it and a child who had learned that the heat would never be her friend. He wrote her name down and asked someone to see if she had a roof with the sort of little leak that remembers you at noon. He learned that a king's mercy is often a roof fixed and not a great gesture. He learned that men talk about gestures because they are impressive stories, and roofs because they sleep better beneath them. In the east, the men with the wrong dragon on their cloth gathered and dispersed and gathered again. Aemon let them be a fever that would not find a body to live in. He said this to Aegon, and Aegon scoffed and then came back days later and said, without pride, You were right in the season, but seasons change. You will need a sword on a field too. Aemon did not deny it. He sent a man he trusted with a sword and a brain and a patience for mud. He sent him with instructions that had more to do with the river levels than with honor. He sent him with a dozen small gifts for the men who would be asked to stand in places where feet rot. There was a day when a certain woman came into the hall, dressed well but with the look of someone who had never been comfortable in stiff cloth, a housewife in armor. She carried a loaf wrapped in a cloth and placed it on the step below the place where he sat when he was required to sit up. For you, she said simply, because you remembered to leave 3 loaves in the ovens for us last winter when the dock froze and the carts could not cross. It was not much, but it was the difference between winter and anger. Aemon looked at the bread and saw in it a shape more coherent than the one that sat on his table at night. He had Ser Duncan carry it with a courtesy that looked like reverence, and later, in his chamber, he ate a slice and felt more kingly than he had felt under the Septon's oil. What changed the line of dragon blood in the world did not happen then. It did not happen in a hall with witnesses. It did not happen in battle with banners. It happened as such things do. With a conversation in a shady room where a woman said to a man, "If you marry me, I will not stop you," and the man laughed and said, "I would marry you to keep myself from stopping." It happened when Aemon sent a Lu Tur to a house in the Vale and another to a house in the Stormlands and a third to Dorne, not to arrange a marriage but to ask the question that precedes all such arrangements, which is, "What do your old women say?" And the answers were different and the same. Old women say that kings come and go, but a king who remembers the names of midwives does not go so soon. He kept the 3 letters in the drawer with the elk hide and the sprig of rosemary that had fallen out of the Citadel woman's letter, and he had not had the heart to throw away. Summer would come and do its cruel kindness, and other years would come with their black banners and their white cloaks, and Aemon would sit with both in his sight. For the moment, he stood at a window, the same window where dust had danced, and he watched a raven land and shake itself like a little old man preparing to speak. He would keep the bird waiting a moment, as he had learned to do, because sometimes the seconds you take before you open a letter are the last seconds you will have before your day becomes someone else's. He stood, and the chain he did not wear and the crown he did not wear lay where he had left them, and men argued in rooms not far away about taxes and honor and the price of hard winters, and a ship scraped along a wharf and the sound made a line on the day that the day would not forget. He smiled at the bird as if the bird were an old friend come without invitation. He reached out and took the message, feeling the dry twig of its weight on his fingers, and thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that the work of keeping a thing is not to hold it tight but to open your hand and measure each thing that falls into it and ask whether it is seed or stone. And then he broke the seal and read, and the day bent itself around what he found.